Hey guys, today we're going to talk about the most common intersections you're going to come across when you're roofing a build, basically everything not a square. I'm not going over round walls today, so if you're interested in learning more about how to roof with circles and the round rooms and all that jazz, I highly recommend jumping over to this video here. You can either click the link at the top of the video description or wait until the end of this video, it will be linked in a card. Let's just start with the basics, shall we? Of course, to get your roof pieces, you're going to select the roofs option over here in the menu. We're going to start with the hipped roof piece on our largest possible portion, which I've already highlighted in red. Now you notice that I do have some purple on here as well. That is to show how the rectangles sort of intersect and hopefully provide a better visual for you while you're building, so you can sort of see how your rooms are intersecting and which roof combination you need to use. But for starters, I am just starting with a hipped roof piece right here. When you place that first piece down, especially when it's covering the largest portion of your build, that's a really good time to figure out how big you want your eaves to be and what you want your overall roof pitch to be. Generally on a one-story build, depending on the style of course, but generally I recommend keeping the roof at or below the level of the wall. So these are short height walls, so I really don't want my roof to be any taller than another short height wall. Once I have that sorted out, I can then copy and place this roof piece everywhere else I need it. Now for this intersection here, which is basically a box sticking out of a box, and for this one over here, which we might call an L, where it shares one wall in common with the main part of the building, but also has a right angle over on this side, this is going to be as simple as copying and placing the roof piece and then just resizing it a little bit. So that was easy. And again over here, I'm going to copy and move the roof piece in just that one direction, resize it, and we're done. However, let me just push this back. When you have sort of a box overlapping another box like we have here, that purple area highlights the overlap, simply copying and placing a roof piece might not always be the best bet because you get this where the lines don't quite meet up and you have this weird valley. So instead what we're going to do is copy a roof piece, and we're only going to move it one direction at a time. So I'm going to move it all the way to my left and resize it here, and then copy and place it but move it only one direction. So in this case I'm going to go down on the screen and then resize it. And now when I pull it in, we've taken care of that weird mismatch and the valley and all of that. So from above, what you should be seeing at this point is a pretty steady line where this doesn't really get interrupted. It does get interrupted here, so the way that we make sure this is done correctly is we check to see if there are any valleys. For example, this would be done incorrectly because we've got a valley there, but that would be as easy as pulling the roof piece in. No more valley. There we go. Once you hit this point, you can usually replace one or most of the roof pieces with gables if you like. So that would be as easy as swapping it out for a gable roof piece. And then I'm going to change the pitch so that our eaves line up. That's a really easy way to see if the pitch matches right there. And then of course pull this in so that it lines up. And now I've broken up the roof line a little bit. Obviously up to you with your style and everything, but that's a pretty quick look at how to roof most of those sort of right angle intersections that you're going to run into while you're building. Now let's talk about all of these diagonal intersections. So this one right here is only the two walls. We don't have a third wall, pretty much half in, half out. And the difference between these two is just where they hit on the corner of the build. This one goes into what I would call a convex, and this one is more concave, or this one creates an acute angle, whereas this one creates an obtuse angle when it intersects the broad side of the building here. This one, of course, overlaps with a corner, creating a whole separate box completely sticking out of the side of the build with two obtuse angles. And this one has an obtuse as well as an acute angle on either side, and it does not intersect a corner of the build. I feel like all those angles and things get confusing, so just take a quick look at this and see which one most closely matches the shape of whatever it is you're trying to build, and then we can talk about which roof pieces to use. Once again, I'm going to start by covering my largest possible portion with a hipped roof piece. Now, why do I always start with a hipped roof piece? Basically, this is the Lego brick of roof pieces. It's always going to intersect with itself really, really well. So it's just a super easy way to start, and that's why. Let's start with this sort of half in, half out one. I'm going to grab a diagonal hipped roof piece and resize it so that this line here aligns with the edge of my building. So if I push this one back, you can see how that is just one solid line running through there. Next, I'm going to take a gable and rotate it so that that open face is facing toward our diagonal room here. And when I push these eaves in and adjust the pitch, I can get it to line up right with the peak, pull this in to hide that little dip, and there we go. Now, one thing to be mindful of when you're roofing with diagonals is it's very difficult to get the eaves and the pitch and everything to line up exactly. So you can either match the pitch as I've done here, or you can get the eaves to line up, or you can extend the eaves of your straight roof pieces twice and then just the eaves of these guys once. And that should let you find the balance of matching that eave as well as getting a really close match to the pitch. However, overextended eaves aren't for everyone, so do what makes the most sense for you and your build, of course. This is pretty much the the only combination that is going to work well for that particular shape. However, this one we have a couple of options. And believe it or not, neither of them are the hipped roof piece. This is one intersection where the hipped roof piece will not work, and this is why right here. It's just going to extend too far if we want it to connect. And if we don't quite connect it, we are going to have this really ugly valley. So skip the hipped here. Not something I say frequently. Instead, what we need is anything with an open gable end, and by anything with an open gable end, I mean literally a gable or a half hipped. Make sure that you have the open end facing in toward the main roof so that when you go to line it up, we can drop the pitch down and it will line up right nice with that seam right there. However, this roof piece, we could use the hipped roof piece if we wanted to because of how it's situated along the build. So there's a look at that. If you use that diagonal half hipped roof piece, it would look the exact same. And for either of these, we can of course use the diagonal gable as well. Same set of rules, pull it all the way in to make sure you don't have that weird valley, and then try to get your eaves to line up if you can. Now this box sticking right off the side here, you can use any of the diagonal roof pieces you want. We can use hipped, half hipped, or the gable, because all you have to do is pull it in, and this is going to create a really nice line right here. Now for all intents and purposes, this roof will be pretty much the same as this one, where you can use any roof piece that you want. It may depend a little bit on the end shape of your build, but I did want to include it as a separate one since intersecting corners versus not intersecting corners, it's kind of two different things. There's another look at our shapes and the roof pieces that we ended up throwing together on them. This one has a mix of eaves and pitches matching, so I recommend sticking with one for your whole build, but of course I wanted to show all of the possibilities. And now let's talk about some of the most common second story roof shapes that you're going to run into, as well as how to roof some of these awkward guys over here. We've got a few main intersections here. The first one is probably the most easy one, which is just one isolated rectangle going straight into a wall. Second easiest is this one, an isolated rectangle with walls on 3 sides. We'd also have something with walls on 2 sides like this. And of course I want to highlight these corners here. So we've got one corner turning out, one corner turning in, and another corner turning out, but where the 2 sides are unequal. So this is 3 tiles, this is 5 tiles. And a note about tile count here real quick. When you're building the second story, the farthest you want any wall to be on the second story from the edge of the first story is 5 tiles. Anything beyond that and your roof is going to start looking really weird. It's going to be much more difficult to get things to place, and the roof pieces are going to be more difficult to pitch down low enough that they're not going to be clipping in. So 5 tiles is the absolute most distance I would ever recommend having between the wall of your first story and the wall of your second. So this roof piece here, we can use a gable, a half gable, or a half hipped roof piece. The reason we could not use a hipped roof piece here is because that's going to create a valley with the water running straight into the wall. We don't want that. I know that doesn't matter in game, but it's a good thing to sort of think about while you're roofing is the direction of the water. And if your water is going to be flowing into your house, you probably want to rethink which roof piece you're using. So here's the gable. The half hipped roof piece, we would put that gable face toward the wall of the second story, pitch it down a little bit there to make it just look a little bit nicer. Or of course the half gable, same deal where we're just going to pitch it down a bit. Now if you don't like this little overlapping eave here, you can hold shift on your keyboard or use the other controls you see on screen to just move one eave at a time, which is a really great way to clean that up. And the only option we have for a roof piece here is the half gable roof piece. Anything else is going to lead to valleys. And again, if you don't like these eaves overhanging, you can just pull them in like so. I would not use a gable here because that's going to direct water into the walls. And we run into the exact same issue with the half hipped and the hipped roof pieces. Now for the corners. So for an outer corner, I will start with a half hipped roof piece. And what I want to do is resize this so that the peak of the roof, this ridgeline right here, lines up with my wall. So I'm going to put it right here. You can see the peak lines up right with that wall. And now, if I have the space where it's not going to clip out the other side, I could just pull this roof all the way over, or I can grab a half gable roof piece and place it so that it is going to line up with this roof piece here. You may have to adjust eaves, you'll adjust the pitch a little bit, but when you're all done, you should have a pretty nice looking corner. I'm aware that the texture is clipping. Sometimes that happens, sometimes it doesn't. Why does it happen sometimes and not other times? I don't know. And then similarly in this direction, we could just extend this roof piece, or we could take that half gable and turn it and place it here. That's going to depend a little bit on what else is happening with your roof. I go into this a bit more in depth in my deck roofing video, which I will also link at the end of this video. That one, I talk about some of these awkward angles and just how to roof decks. It's one of my most popular videos to date, so I highly recommend checking it out. Now, internal corners. Actually, we've already started, so let's just continue. This one's probably the easiest one. You're going to take a half gable, you're going to take another half gable, and that's it. That is as easy as it gets. Now this corner here is another outer corner, but it's turning into an area that's significantly wider. When I grab my half hipped roof piece and pull it over so that I can get that ridge line to line up. Oh, I was really close. One more tile. You can see the front is still nice and clean, but when we turn to the side, it goes up at an angle. This is pretty much not workaroundable. That's just how the roof is going to look, but that's no big deal. Now, finally, coming over here, this roof piece right here has a giant triangle cutting into it, and you roof it the exact same as you would roof this piece over here using pretty much anything but a hipped roof piece. You can just as easily use a gable, a half hipped, or a half gable roof piece. Now for this one, here you should be able to use a half gable or a half hipped roof piece. I'm going to face my gable in toward the main part of the build here so that when I resize this roof and pitch it down a little bit, I don't have this eave coming around the roof at all, as opposed to if I did this exact same thing with the hipped roof piece. It's going to look pretty much the same until I bring those eaves out, and then we have that eave wrapping around. So that's why I personally would use the half hipped roof piece instead, or the half gable, which would just be a matter of matching the width, pulling it in like this, and then pitching it down to hide the weird bits. And if you don't like this eave wrapping around, you can again hold shift or use the other controls you see on screen to pull that in. And that's how you'd roof one of those awkward triangles. Now I do want to note that these awkward triangles will not work if the inside of your room has any sort of fence or is otherwise dictated to be an outdoor room, because it will clip in, and we do not have triangle roof shaped pieces, so be aware of that in your space planning. If you want to have an open area at all, or a fence or anything, you're going to have to move it far enough away from the roof that it won't clip in. And if you want to learn more about that, I recommend checking out this video. All these videos are in the playlist that this video will be in. I'm going to have a bunch of links at the end of this video for you. And now we've got this piece here. Now the most challenging bit of this is going to be figuring out how to roof this side without the eaves coming out this side, because we could pretty easily just put a gable on here, right? We'll cover that up, we'll pitch this down a little bit for the aesthetics, and we've got eaves all coming out this side. So a couple of ways we could work around this. If you like the gable, all you have to do is push this back so that that green line is matching with your wall here, and move this one eave. Then we'll copy and place that exact same roof piece right next to itself, like this, but hold shift on this side now to remove that eave. So that would be a way to use the gable. If you prefer the look of a hipped roof piece, pretty much the same thing where you're going to just leave that gable where it is, just use a half hipped roof piece on the side instead of the gable. And now when I match our eaves and everything, we've got this nice clean bit here where it all meets up, and we don't have the eaves sticking out on the side, which again we would have if we just pulled this all the way through. So there's a quick look at all of the main intersections that you're going to see while you're roofing your builds in The Sims 4. This isn't the video I planned on putting out for Christmas, but my health really sucks right now, and I love making these videos. I make as many as I can when I can, and unfortunately, sometimes that means you get yet another roofing video, because believe it or not, this is what I do when I'm tired. If you have more questions or a very specific shape in mind, I highly recommend checking out this playlist. Just scroll through, take a look at some of the thumbnails, or I recommend checking out this video here about how to roof decks. That one is super duper popular, especially for some of those weird turns that you might get when you're doing a 2-level build. And I recommend checking out this video with all of the round wall tips and tricks that I know. Thank you so much for watching. Thank you so much for building with me today, and I look forward to building with you again very, very soon. Bye!